Before Green Acres and the Beverly Hillbillies, there was Petticoat Junction, a seemingly harmless sitcom about a widow, her 3 daughters, and a little hotel in Hooterville. But behind that cheerful world were stories far darker than anything viewers saw on screen. Bea Benaderet was secretly battling terminal lung cancer while continuing to film the show. Smiley Burnett hid his leukemia diagnosis so production wouldn't be disrupted, and Edgar Buchanan, before becoming Uncle Joe, he was actually a practicing dentist who abandoned medicine to become an actor. Then one cast member died during the show's run, while others walked away from Hollywood completely. 60 years later, this is what really happened to the cast of Petticoat Junction. Number 1. Bea Benaderet.
Maybe you better ask him. Here he comes.
Bea Benaderet played Kate Bradley, the widow, the emotional center, the woman the entire show was built around. She was 57 years old when the program premiered. Born in New York City in 1906, the daughter of a pharmacist. By the time Petticoat Junction cast her, she had already spent 2 entire decades as radio and television's most reliable supporting actress. She had stolen scenes from Jack Benny, from George Burns, from Lucille Ball. And whilst she was filming this program, she was simultaneously voicing Betty Rubble on the Flintstones, performing an entire dual career across television simultaneously. Paul Henning had watched her work for years. He had observed her ability to build warmth into a scene, to create authenticity out of comedy. And then he made a deliberate decision. He would create an entire program specifically around her talents. He would make her the lead. He would write Petticoat Junction as a vehicle for Bea Benaderet. Here is what most viewers never knew whilst they were watching this unfold. Bea was fighting for her life almost from the beginning. Doctors found a spot on her lung during a routine medical checkup in 1963, the exact year the program premiered. It vanished. She continued filming. She continued working. Then in 1967, it returned. By then, it was too large to ignore. She underwent surgery that November. The surgeons found the tumor was inoperable. The diagnosis was terminal. She kept filming anyway. She returned to the set for as long as her body physically allowed it. She missed only 10 episodes across the entire subsequent run, a genuinely remarkable achievement considering the reality of what was happening to her internally. She was performing Kate Bradley's warmth whilst knowing with absolute certainty that her time was limited. She had married twice and had 2 children, including son Jack Bannon, who became an actor himself. She spent her final year filming episodes she understood might be her last, absolutely determined not to let the cast discover how seriously ill she was until she genuinely had no choice but to tell them. On October 13, 1968, just days into filming what would have been her 6th season, Bea Benaderet died of lung cancer at age 62. Her husband, sound technician Eugene Twambly, died 4 days later. The woman who had built an entire television hotel out of pure warmth spent her final year filming episodes knowing they might be among her last, determined to protect her cast from the burden of her diagnosis. Kate Bradley was a stepmother who could solve any problem. Bea Benaderet solved her own terminal illness by refusing to let it interrupt the work she loved until her body simply would not cooperate anymore. Number 2. Linda K. Henning. Linda K. Henning played Betty Jo Bradley, the youngest daughter, the tomboy. She was 18 years old when the program premiered. She was also the real-life daughter of Paul Henning, the man who created this entire fictional world. And there is a rather remarkable story about how that casting actually happened. Bea Benaderet herself, the program's foundation, had actually pushed for Linda to be allowed to audition for the role. But Paul Henning placed a condition on it. His daughter would have to earn the part on her own merits. No nepotism, no guarantee. She would walk into that audition room and demonstrate why she deserved to be cast, the same as any other actress. She did. She earned it. And then she did something rather extraordinary. She remained the only actress in the entire Bradley family to appear across all 7 seasons of the show without ever being recast. Not once. Not for a single episode. What most viewers absolutely never knew is how dramatically her on-screen and off-screen lives nearly aligned in ways that could have genuinely complicated everything. Betty Jo Bradley married Steve Elliott, played by actor Mike Miner, in a November 1967 episode, a fictional wedding broadcast across American television. Linda K. Henning and Mike Miner were actually dating at the time. They had planned their real wedding to line up with the broadcast. They had literally planned their actual marriage to occur at the same moment as their television marriage. Then a falling out occurred, a relationship complication. The wedding was delayed. It would be almost a year before they married in September 1968, well after Betty Jo's fictional wedding had already aired. They divorced 5 years later. After the program ended, Henning worked steadily in guest roles across Happy Days, Mork and Mindy, and Sliders through the 1990s before stepping back from acting almost entirely. As of 2026, she is 81 years old. She remarried in 1994 to her husband Ashby Adams, and she has spent years working as a docent at the Los Angeles Zoo, where visitors occasionally still recognize her. Betty Jo Bradley was the one daughter in 3 who never had to be replaced. Linda K. Henning was the one cast member who was present for the very first episode and appeared in every single one that followed. Number 3. Edgar Buchanan.
This place got a telephone?
Edgar Buchanan played Uncle Joe Carson, the laziest man in Hooterville. He was billed the comic relief, the charming rascal who would steal scenes and create comedy out of pure misdirection. He was 60 years old when the program premiered, born in Humansville, Missouri in 1903. And before he became Uncle Joe Carson, he had lived an entirely different professional life that virtually nobody in television knew about. Edgar Buchanan was a practicing dentist. He ran an oral surgery practice in Oregon with his wife Mildred. His own father was also a dentist, and his father had pushed him relentlessly toward the profession, considering acting a life of mediocrity and uncertainty. Edgar had listened. He had built a legitimate medical practice. He had established himself as a trained surgeon. Then, at age 36, in 1939, he gave it up entirely. He turned his back on dentistry and pursued acting full-time, precisely the career his father had warned him against. What followed was over 4 decades of proving his father absolutely wrong. More than 100 films, a significant run as Red Connors in the Hopalong Cassidy series, a reputation on set as the man who would still pull a tooth for crew members if someone needed it, using instruments he kept in his dressing room like some sort of traveling surgeon. He married Mildred Spence in 1928, and that marriage held for 51 consecutive years until his death. Here is the genuinely remarkable thing about Edgar Buchanan. He appeared in all 222 episodes of Petticoat Junction's 7-season run. Every single one. Not one episode was filmed without him. Not one episode was recast. After B. Benaderet died in 1968, Buchanan effectively became the show's lead for its final 2 seasons, running the Shady Rest Hotel alone on screen, the way he had once run his own dental practice in Oregon. In early 1979, Buchanan suffered a stroke. He underwent brain surgery. He spent several weeks in a coma. And then, on April 4, 1979, Edgar Buchanan died at age 76. April 4th, the same calendar date, oddly, on which B. Benaderet had been born, and also the same date on which the show's final episode had aired. 9 years earlier, almost to the day. The dentist who abandoned medicine to become a rascal spent his real life pulling teeth and playing comic characters, and ended up as the single man Hooterville simply could not function without. He died on a date that connected him backward to the woman who had built this world and forward to the final episode he had helped create. Number 4. Smiley Burnett.
This Charlie, it don't matter if we are behind schedule.
Smiley Burnett played Charlie Pratt, the engineer of the Hooterville Cannonball, the man who ran the fictional train that carried so much of the show's narrative weight. He was 52 years old when Petticoat Junction premiered, born Lester Alvin Burnett in Illinois in 1911. And before Hooterville, he had already lived an entire separate career that most television viewers had absolutely no idea about. He had appeared in more than 80 Western films as Gene Autry's comic sidekick, a character named Frog Milhouse. He had become one of the highest-paid Western stars in Hollywood, ranked second only to Gene Autry himself in a 1940 popularity poll. That's not a minor accomplishment. That's sustained superstardom across an entire genre. What most viewers never knew is that Smiley Burnett could reportedly play over 100 musical instruments entirely by ear, despite never learning to read sheet music. He had written more than 300 songs recorded across his film career. He brought that musicality to Petticoat Junction, performing between takes for the cast and crew, entertaining people with skills that extended far beyond his on-screen role. Just after wrapping the show's 4th season, Smiley Burnette fell seriously ill. He chose to keep his diagnosis private, not to protect his own privacy, but because he did not want to disrupt the production. He understood that if the producers and the network knew how sick he was, there would be pressure to recast, to adjust schedules, to change the entire production apparatus around his illness. So he stayed silent. He completed his final episode before he was too sick to work anymore. Smiley Burnette died of leukemia on February 16, 1967, 1 month before what would have been his 56th birthday. He was buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. The engineer who ran a fictional train for 4 seasons kept the real clock on his own life a complete secret, until it ran out entirely. He chose dignity and the continuation of the work he loved over the comfort that would have come from sharing the burden with others. Number 5. Meredith McRae. The role of Billie Joe Bradley required 3 different actresses across the show's 7-season run. Meredith McRae was the 3rd, and the one who would carry the character longest. She was 22 years old when she joined the cast in 1966. Born in Houston, Texas on an Army base, where her father, Broadway and film star Gordon McRae, was stationed. She had already built a career of her own by that point, playing Sally Morrison on My 3 Sons for 3 consecutive seasons. She had asked to be written off that show specifically to chase other roles. Under McRae, Billie Joe evolved considerably from what her 2 predecessors had played. The earlier versions had emphasized the boy crazy blonde aspect of the character. McRae shifted the emphasis. She developed Billie Joe into a more independent young woman, actively pursuing a singing career of her own, a career that reflected McRae's own musical background and interests. She stayed with the role from 1966 until the series ended in 1970. What most viewers never knew is that Meredith McRae built one of the more unusual second acts of any Petticoat Junction cast member once the program concluded. She left acting almost entirely in the 1980s. Instead, she became a television journalist. She hosted an interview show called Mid-Morning Los Angeles for 8 consecutive years and won a local Emmy for the work. She had effectively pivoted from entertainment performance to journalism, building an entirely new career out of curiosity and interview skills rather than relying on her previous fame. She married 3 times, including a 1969 marriage to actor Greg Millay that produced her only child, daughter Allison, before ending in divorce. In January of 1999, Meredith McRae began experiencing vertigo and memory loss. Doctors found a brain tumor. She underwent surgery. She volunteered for an experimental drug trial, pursuing every available treatment option. But despite all of those interventions, despite her willingness to try experimental medicine, she died at her Manhattan Beach home on July 14, 2000, at age 56. She was cremated. Her ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean off the California coast she had spent her whole life beside. The daughter who had spent 4 seasons on screen dreaming of a singing career had built a real one in journalism instead, only to lose it to a disease that no rewrite could fix, and no amount of professional reinvention could forestall. Number 6. Pat Woodell. Pat Woodell was the original Bobby Joe Bradley, the bookish middle daughter. She was 19 years old when the program premiered in 1963, and from the beginning she was quietly plotting an exit. She made her mark early by performing musical numbers on the show. One particularly memorable act involved a Beatles parody performed by a group called the Ladybugs, which actually performed on The Ed Sullivan Show. A genuinely rare bit of real music industry attention for a cast member still playing a teenager on a sitcom. By 1965, just 2 seasons in, she left the series entirely. Years later, speaking to the Chicago Tribune, she explained her reasoning with absolute clarity. "I was going nowhere with it. That kind of role is real depredation after a while." She was right. The role was limiting. It was defining. It was the kind of casting that could have trapped her in typecasting for her entire career. So she walked away. What most viewers never knew is how deliberately Pat Woodell pushed against every form of typecasting once she left the program. She toured as a singer alongside Jack Benny. She released her own album. And then, in a genuinely provocative career move that absolutely baffled the family-friendly entertainment establishment, She took a starring role in an exploitation film called The Big Dollhouse, a deliberate, calculated swing away from anything resembling wholesome Hooterville television. It was a statement. It was a refusal. It was an attempt to permanently shatter the image of the girl next door by appearing in exactly the kind of film that family audience members would never expect her to touch. Neither the singing career nor the film work ever fully broke through into genuine mainstream success. Woodell eventually walked away from acting altogether to become a business consultant. She built her own consulting firm from scratch, creating something that had absolutely nothing to do with her television past. She married Vern McDade, and she quietly battled cancer for more than 2 decades before it finally caught up with her. Pat Woodell died in 2015 at age 71. Bobby Joe Bradley spent 2 seasons planning her escape from Hooterville. Pat Woodell spent the next 5 decades finding out that leaving was only the beginning of a much longer, considerably more complicated fight against a system designed to trap people like her. Number 7. Janine Riley and Gunilla Hutton. The role of Billie Joe Bradley required 3 different actresses across the show's run. We have already discussed Meredith McRae, but the 2 actresses who played her before deserve their own consideration. Janine Riley was the first Billie Joe Bradley. She was 23 years old when the program premiered. Born in Fresno, California, she had trained for 2 years at the Pasadena Playhouse before landing small parts on Route 66 and The Man from U.N.C.L.E. She had auditioned alongside more than 300 other actresses for the Billie Joe role. She had beaten all of them. She played Billie Joe for the show's first 2 seasons before walking away in 1965 to pursue bigger film roles. What actually happened afterward was considerably more brutal than anyone might have anticipated. Typecasting hit her with absolute force. She landed steady work on Hee Haw once Petticoat Junction ended, but she later admitted in interviews that the very shows that paid my rent also nearly buried my career. "It's tough to get out of that rut," she said years later, after a string of variety and rural comedy roles had followed her from one show to the next. She kept working through the late 1960s and 1970s in guest spots across Love American Style and in a short-lived 1973 series called Dusty's Trail, reuniting her with fellow Bradley sister Laurie Saunders, though this time as fellow stranded travelers on a wagon train rather than sisters under the same roof. As of 2026, Riley is 85 years old and has largely stepped back from the spotlight, though she published a self-help book in recent years aimed at women navigating reinvention later in life. Gunilla Hutton was the second actress to play Billie Joe Bradley. She was 22 when she took over the role in 1965. Born in Stockholm, Sweden, she had moved to the United States as a child. She lasted exactly 1 season before finding a much longer home on an entirely different rural comedy stage. She left Petticoat Junction after a single season and found her signature role a few years later as Nurse Goodbody on Hee Haw, a character built around a running gag involving a doctor's office that she kept for years. What most viewers never knew is that Hutton's real-life romantic history included one of the more talked-about entanglements of the era. She had a long relationship with singer Nat King Cole. The relationship reportedly ended only after Hutton herself made a deliberate decision. She phoned Cole's wife Maria, urging her to seek a divorce. Cole ended the relationship with Hutton shortly after that telephone call. She released several singles of her own during her Hee Haw years and stayed connected to the Petticoat Junction cast for decades afterward, appearing alongside several of her former co-stars in a 1983 Family Feud reunion special that pitted the Hooterville cast against the Brady Bunch. As of 2026, Hutton is 83 and has a daughter named Amber. The blonde who lasted 1 season on the Cannonball ended up singing on national television for considerably longer than she ever spent in Hooterville. Number 8. Rufe Davis and Frank Cady. Rufe Davis played Floyd Smoot, the fireman, conductor, and occasional engineer of the Hooterville Cannonball. He was 54 years old when the program premiered. Born Rufus Davidson on an Oklahoma farm in 1908, one of 12 children. He had spent 30 years in vaudeville and B-westerns before Petticoat Junction, including 14 films in the Three Musketeers series. What absolutely defined Ruf Davis before television ever hired him was his ability to imitate a train whistle so convincingly that it became his signature party trick across decades. He could produce the sound entirely vocally, a skill that made him invaluable to a show built around a fictional railway. He had been close friends with Smiley Burnette for years before the two ever worked together in Hooterville. When Burnette died in 1967, Davis took over Charlie's train duties on screen. The grief was personal. The two had become neighbors in 1966, taking apartments next door to each other near the studio. They were scheduled to perform together at Los Angeles' Shrine Auditorium the night after Burnette died. Davis married twice, most recently to the show's own wardrobe mistress, Nettie Jane Scott, in 1969. The couple spent his final years touring the country together in a camper so Davis could keep performing at fairs and children's hospitals, the same kind of live audiences he had been working since his vaudeville days nearly 50 years earlier. He suffered a heart attack in the autumn of 1974 and underwent open-heart surgery. Rufe Davis died 11 days after his 66th birthday, on December 13, 1974. He is interred at Forest Lawn Hollywood Hills, where his wife joined him 25 years later. Frank Cady played Sam Druckett, the calm, reasonable general store owner who somehow anchored 3 separate CBS rural sitcoms at the exact same time, a feat no other actor in television history has matched. He was 48 when Petticoat Junction premiered. Born in Susanville, California, in 1915, he had already built a steady career playing Doc Williams on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet for over a decade. But his genuine claim to television distinction came during 1968 to 1969, when he simultaneously played Sam Druckett on Petticoat Junction, Green Acres, and the Beverly Hillbillies, appearing as the same character in the same town across 3 different network shows airing in the same season. That's an extraordinary achievement in television production. The same actor, the same character, 3 different programs, all operating within the same fictional universe, all airing on the same network, all in the same television season. What most viewers never knew is how quietly Cady walked away from Hollywood once the rural purge canceled all 3 shows in 1970. He relocated from California to Oregon to be closer to his daughter. He spent his retirement hiking as far as the Swiss Alps and writing occasional pieces for his local newspaper. He came out of retirement only once for a cameo in the 1984 MASH spin-off After MASH, and again briefly in the 1990s returned to Green Acres, his final on-screen role. He married Shirley, and that marriage lasted 68 years until her death in 2008. They had 2 children. Frank Cady died at his Wilsonville, Oregon home on June 8, 2012, at age 96. The longest-lived member of the entire Petticoat Junction cast, the steadiest man in Hooterville, turned out to be the steadiest man off-screen as well, quietly outlasting nearly everyone who ever shared a scene with him. Number 9. Laurie Saunders. Laurie Saunders took over as Bobby Joe Bradley in 1965 and stayed with the role for the remainder of the show's run. 5 consecutive seasons, more than any other actress to play a Bradley daughter besides Linda Kay Henning herself. She was in her early 20s when she joined the cast, having started acting in 1960, with guest spots on The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. Under her portrayal, Bobby Joe shifted from Woodell's bookish original characterization into a more scatterbrained, comic version of the character. She played exceptionally well against her on-screen sisters and became, alongside Linda Kay Henning, one of the 2 most consistent faces in the entire back half of the show's run. What most viewers never knew is that Saunders reunited with 2 of her former Petticoat Junction co-stars for one more rural comedy after this one concluded. In 1973, she starred alongside Janine Riley in Dusty's Trail, a short-lived Gilligan's Island knockoff set on a wagon train instead of an island. The show lasted only a single season. She has remained one of the most visible former cast members at Petticoat Junction fan events and retrospectives over the decades since. As of 2026, Saunders is 84, lives in Southern California with her longtime husband Bernard Sandler, and spends her time on photography, sculpture, and oil painting. Bobby Joe Bradley never quite got her happy ending on screen. Laurie Saunders built hers slowly off-camera, in a studio full of paint instead of a train full of passengers. 11 people built the Shady Rest Hotel and the Hooterville Cannonball on a Hollywood soundstage. 7 of them are gone now. Bea Benaderet died of lung cancer, fighting her illness throughout an entire season of filming. Edgar Buchanan died on the exact same calendar date as both Bea's birth and the show's final episode. Smiley Burnett kept his terminal diagnosis secret to protect the production. Meredith McRae's ashes were scattered in the Pacific Ocean. Pat Waddell battled cancer for 2 decades before it caught up with her. A forest lawn mausoleum, an Oregon farmhouse, ashes scattered in the Pacific, a plot shared with a wife who followed 25 years later. 4 are still here. From a zoo in Los Angeles to a painting studio in Southern California, all of them still feeling the same question more than 60 years on. What was it really like on that train? Every death certificate, casting history, and documented personal detail in this script was confirmed before a word was written. Subscribe if that's the standard you want more of, because Petticoat Junction represents exactly why that standard matters, not as nostalgic entertainment, but as genuine historical record of what actually happened to real people who built something that lasted far longer than any of them could have predicted. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe. The algorithm favors completion, and you've just given this piece exactly what it needed. If you grew up watching this show, tell me in the comments which Bradley daughter was your favorite. Tell me whether you even noticed when the actress changed. Tell me which cast member's story surprised you most. I read every single reply.